She is unstable and dangerous around children, so if anyone here has a kid with them tonight, do not leave that child alone with Lindsay," my mother said, and 32 people at my housewarming went quiet. I lost a daycare job over that sentence. I lost my boyfriend's trust for 6 days, his sister's trust for 4 months, and half the town's casual belief that I was normal. Then a daycare owner I had only met twice walked into a church meeting room with a printed email and read one sentence aloud, and my father closed his mouth so hard I heard his teeth click. "My name is Lindsey Elaine Mercer. I'm 24 years old. Now let me take you back to Cedar Falls, Washington, on Saturday, May 11th, 2024. Before I go on, please take a moment to like and subscribe, but only if you genuinely connect with this story, and drop a comment telling me where you're watching from and what time it is there. I always love seeing where you're all listening from. I had been back in Cedar Falls for 12 days. Cedar Falls is one of those small Washington towns that still feels like a place people pass through on purpose. Population 3,812, according to the sign by State Route 27, one grocery store, one coffee stand in a converted shed, one stoplight. Everybody knows who teaches second grade and who drinks too much, and who had a baby early, and whose truck is always parked outside the VFW hall. I had moved back after finishing a 9-month behavioral aid certificate in Spokane. My program focused on early childhood support, mostly for kids who needed extra structure, sensory regulation, and patient adults who did not take things personally. I loved that work. I was good at it in the steady, unglamorous way that matters. I knew how to sit on a tiny plastic chair for 40 minutes and redirect a spiral without making the child feel ashamed. I knew when a child needed quiet and when they needed a task. I knew the difference between escalation and fear. I had a job lined up at Little Pines Learning Center on Maple Street. $19 an hour, 36 hours a week to start, with health insurance after 60 days. I was supposed to begin on Monday, May 20th. I still remember the smell of my new apartment the week I got the keys. Fresh paint over old drywall, industrial carpet cleaner, and that faint dusty sweetness empty places have before your own soap and coffee and laundry take over. The housewarming was not at my apartment. That part matters. My parents, Dana and Russell Mercer, insisted on hosting it at their split level on Juniper Ridge Drive because, according to my mother, people need a proper place to park and your complex looks transient. She said that while standing at my sink holding one of my mismatched mugs like it had offended her, she had volunteered to help me settle in, which in my mother's language always meant inspect, rearrange, and make sure everybody understood that anything good in my life had somehow still come through her. My parents did not throw parties because they were generous. They threw parties because they liked witnesses. By 6:30 that Saturday, the downstairs smelled like Italian sausage, candle wax, and the sharp lemon cleaner my mother used on every surface. The kitchen island was crowded with grocery store pinwheels, a sweating bowl of ranch dip, and a tray of blondies cut into perfect squares because my mother believed sloppy food made people think poorly of your family. There were 32 people there by my count. I know that because I counted twice after it happened. My Aunt Cheryl and Uncle Tom, my cousin Mariah and her husband Joel, 3 women from my mother's church group, 2 neighbors from Alder Lane who ran the Sunday nursery rotation, my boyfriend Nolan Pierce and his sister Becca, who had her 4-year-old son Wyatt with her because their sitter canceled, my old high school librarian, a couple named Steve and Andrea Colton from my father's hardware store circles, and Andrea mattered because her sister, Elise Navarro, owned Little Pines Learning Center. My mother knew that. She knew exactly who was standing where when she said it. At 7:14, my father tapped his beer bottle with a fork for attention. That little thin ringing sound cut through the room. People shifted. Someone laughed softly, expecting a toast. I was standing by the sliding glass door holding a paper plate I had barely touched. Ham pinwheel, cube of cheddar, 2 baby carrots. Nolan was beside me. Wyatt was on the floor with a toy truck somebody had brought to keep him occupied. My father smiled in that practiced civic way he used when he wanted to sound like the reasonable man of the family. "We are proud Lindsay is back home," he said. "Fresh start. New place, new opportunities." Then my mother took over. She did not raise her voice. She never needed to. She had the kind of voice people lean toward because it sounds controlled, concerned, mature. That was her real talent. She could say something monstrous in the tone most people use to ask if you need a sweater. Before everyone gets too comfortable, she said, I think honesty matters. Lindsey has had instability issues, serious ones, and because several of you work with children or have children here tonight, I need to say this plainly. She is unstable and dangerous around children, so if anyone here has a kid with them tonight, do not leave that child alone with Lindsey. The room went quiet. Not movie quiet, worse. Real quiet. Silverware touching paper plates. The refrigerator kicking on. Wyatt's truck wheels scraping once across hardwood and then stopping because Becca had picked him up too fast. I felt every face in the room move toward me. Not the dramatic kind, the inventory kind. People checking my expression, my hands, my posture, trying to see if they had missed something obvious. That is what public humiliation really is. Not just being insulted, being converted into a question mark in front of other people. I set my plate down on the windowsill because my hand had started to shake, and I knew if I kept holding it, I would drop ranch dressing on my own shoes. Nolan said, Dana, what are you talking about? My mother folded her hands in front of her stomach. Calm, prepared. I'm talking about what I have witnessed. Mood episodes, poor judgment, concerning fixation. We have tried to protect her privacy, but now she is working around children and people deserve to make informed decisions. I said, that is not true. My father gave a tiny, sad shake of his head like I had just confirmed something for him. Lindsey, do not do this here. Do what? I asked. Escalate. The cruelty of that landed so cleanly that for a second I almost admired it. They had built a trap where denying the accusation became proof of the accusation. Becca was already backing toward the hallway with Wyatt against her shoulder. Andrea Colton had gone still in that church lady way that means a story is entering the town bloodstream in real time. My Aunt Cheryl stared at the floor. She knew something. I could tell by the way she would not look up. I did not cry. I did not yell. Instead, I took my phone out of my cardigan pocket and hit record. My mother saw me do it. Her mouth tightened for half a second. Then she smiled. See, she said to the room. This is exactly the kind of thing I mean, I said. Please repeat what you just said. No one moved. That silence lasted maybe 5 seconds. It felt like 50. My mother said, I said, you are not safe around children when you are unstable. I asked, when was I unstable around a child? She said, I am not going to list private incidents at your own gathering. Private incidents, there had been no incidents. Nolan stepped in front of me then. Not dramatically. Just enough that our shoulders touched. We are leaving, he said, and my mother answered him. If you care about your future, you should ask better questions. I remember the smell of grilled onions from the crock-pot meatballs turning sour in my throat as we walked out. In the driveway, under the yellow porch light, Nolan said, Lines, tell me what that was. I said, a lie. He nodded once, but he was scared. I could see it. Not of me exactly, of the possibility that there was something he should have known. People hear the phrase dangerous around children and their brain fills the rest in for them. That was the brilliance of what she did. She never named a crime, she just activated one in everybody else's head. I went home to my one bedroom on East 3rd Avenue and sat on the floor with my back against the couch. Because I had not unpacked the lamp yet, and the kitchen light was too bright. My phone buzzed 18 times in 2 hours. 3 text messages from friends asking if I was okay. 4 from relatives pretending not to ask questions while asking them anyway. 2 from my mother, 1 from my father. 6 from Nolan, 2 from numbers I did not know. My mother's first text came at 8:03. You need professional help. We said what had to be said. The second came at 8:19. If you make this uglier, we will tell the whole story. There was no whole story. I screenshotted both and started a folder. I named it May 11th. That is how some lives change. Not with a scream. With a folder. By Monday morning, the consequences had started arriving in regular business language. At 9:12, Elise Navarro from Little Pines left me a voicemail while I was standing in line at Cedar Falls Coffee Shed buying a $6 oat milk latte I suddenly could not afford. The espresso machine hissed through the whole message. Hi, Lindsey, this is Elise at Little Pines. I need to postpone your start date while I review some concerns that were brought to my attention over the weekend. Please give me a call when you can. Review some concerns. I stood in that gravel parking lot with my drink sweating into my hand and listened to it 3 times. When I called her back, she sounded embarrassed but cautious. I'm not making any final decisions, she said, but a serious concern was raised by a family source and followed up in writing. Because we serve children from 18 months to 5 years old, I have to be careful. Followed up how? I asked. There was a pause. Email. By who? Another pause. Your mother. I wrote that down on the back of my coffee receipt. Monday, May 13th, 9:26 a.m. Elise said mom emailed. If you have ever had that moment where your body goes cold before your brain can catch up, you know this feeling. Not panic, inventory. Your mind starts shelving facts as fast as it can because it senses you're going to need them later. Stay with me, because this was the part where I realized my mother had not just humiliated me. She had started building a paper trail of lies, and paper trails can ruin you if you do not answer them. If this kind of story hits something familiar for you, please subscribe now. It really does help this channel, and it tells me I am not the only woman who learned to document before she learned to trust. I called my training supervisor in Spokane next. Her name was Marisol Vega. She had supervised my final 7-week placement at Birch Creek Pediatric Support Center, and she was one of the only adults in my life who had ever evaluated me without my family speaking over me first. When she answered, I was sitting in my car with the windows cracked because the upholstery still smelled faintly like old French fries and winter damp. I said, "Can I ask you something strange?" She said, "Given your voice right now, I am going to say yes and also ask if you're safe." I told her what happened. Not all of it, just the clean version. Housewarming. Mother said I was unstable and dangerous around children. Daycare delayed start. Follow-up email. Marisol was quiet for maybe 3 seconds. Then she said, "Lindsey, pull every document you have from your program. Attendance logs, performance evaluations, clinical notes, anything with dates, and email me from your personal address right now asking for a copy of your placement review and any incident records involving you." "There are none, but ask anyway." I said, "Why?" "Because when someone lies with specifics, you answer with records. Do not call your mother again. Do not defend yourself in text messages. Build a packet. A packet again. Plain language matters." She did not tell me to pursue anything or make threats. She told me to build a packet, so I did. By Monday at 1:40, I had created a second folder on my laptop titled Response. Inside it, I put screenshots of my parents' texts, the voicemail from Elise transcribed word for word, my offer letter from Little Pines dated May 1st, and every document I had from Spokane Valley Behavioral Institute where I completed my certificate. I requested official copies of my attendance records. I downloaded the PDF of my final evaluation, where Marisol had written, "Lindsey demonstrates calm, consistent judgment in high-stress environments involving children." I stared at that sentence for a long time. I also called Cedar Valley Counseling, where I had been seeing a therapist named Dr. Hannah Rivas once every other week since January for anxiety management. Not crisis care, not inpatient anything, not psych holds, basic therapy with insurance copays and a regular Tuesday slot at 4 o'clock. The receptionist told me they could give me an attendance summary and a letter confirming treatment compliance if I signed a release. I drove there before they closed. The lobby smelled like peppermint tea and printer toner. I signed the release with a hand that was steadier than I felt. At 5:38 that evening, Nolan came over with pad thai and 2 cans of ginger ale. He stood in my doorway for a second before he stepped in, and I noticed that hesitation. I will never forget it. That was the real damage. Not just what strangers thought. What hesitation entered people who loved me. He said, "I believe you. I just need to know if there is anything, even a bad moment, that they can twist." I appreciated the honesty. I hated the need for it. "There is nothing," I said. "Not a scare, not a complaint, not a single incident." He nodded. "Okay." Then he pulled out his own phone and said, "Becca recorded some of what happened because she thought your mom's toast was going to be weird in a normal way." She stopped after the accusation, but she caught the first part. That was the first good thing. He texted me the video. 37 seconds. You could hear my father's fork tapping the bottle. You could see the kitchen island and half the living room. My mother's face was in profile, but her voice was clear enough to raise the hair on my arms. She is unstable and dangerous around children. There it was, preserved. Not all the harm had to be proven, just enough of it. Tuesday morning, I got the email from Cedar Valley Counseling. One page. My name, date of birth, dates of appointments attended from January 9th through May 7th. No missed visits, no safety concerns noted in the attendance summary. The wording was careful, but it existed. At 11:16, Marisol sent my placement records. 7 pages, full marks on patient interaction, de-escalation, professional boundaries, and emotional regulation. At the bottom of one evaluation she had written, Lindsey's calm presence has a measurable settling effect on dysregulated children. I printed everything at Office Depot in Spokane because I did not trust the one printer in town not to jam while I was trying to save my life. 34 pages total, I put them in a blue expanding file. That is how long it took me to become someone who carried evidence into ordinary places. The pushback came from family first. On Wednesday, May 15th at 6:42 p.m., my Aunt Cheryl called while I was unloading groceries. Frozen peas, dish soap, strawberries, 1 carton of eggs. Her voice had that careful church basement softness people use when they want credit for gentleness while still backing the wrong side. "Your mother is worried about you," she said. I put the eggs down on the counter and leaned against the fridge. "She cost me my job start." "Well, sweetheart, people do not say those things for no reason. Then ask her for the reason." A pause. Then Cheryl said there was the incident with Jonah. I straightened. "What incident at Thanksgiving when you got overwhelmed and took him out to the driveway?" I actually laughed once, because Jonah was my cousin's 6-year-old son, and at Thanksgiving 2022, he had had a full sensory meltdown over the hand mixer noise in my grandmother's kitchen. I took him outside to sit on the back step and count blue cars until he calmed down. My cousin Mariah thanked me for it. I said Mariah texted me that night and said I saved dinner. Cheryl went quiet. Then she said, "I just think your parents have held a lot." There it was, the family script. They had held a lot, they were burdened. I was difficult. Reality did not matter as much as the story architecture. I wrote down what Cheryl said too. Wednesday, May 15th, 6:42 p.m. Aunt Cheryl references Jonah Thanksgiving driveway. Then I texted Mariah, "Do you remember Thanksgiving 2022? When Jonah got overstimulated and I took him outside?" She replied in 3 minutes, "Yes, you were great with him. Why?" I did not answer right away. I screenshotted the message first. If you have ever had to verify your own memory before you could grieve what someone did to you, I know you are already tired listening to this. I was tired living it. But this next part matters because the people who stay silent are sometimes the hinge the whole story swings on. On Thursday, May 16th at 1:10 in the afternoon, I got the email my mother had sent Elise Navarro. I did not get it from my mother. I got it because Elise called and said, "I need you to know I'm trying to be fair here. I cannot forward you the full thing yet, but I can read portions if you want to write them down." I grabbed a legal pad. She read slowly. Subject line, urgent child safety concern regarding new hire Lindsey Mercer. Then, as Lindsey's mother, I feel morally obligated to disclose that she has a documented history of emotional instability, fixation on children, and unsafe boundary lapses that our family has been quietly managing for years. I stopped writing for a second because my hand had cramped. Elise continued, "We hoped maturity would help, but at her recent gathering she displayed familiar patterns of agitation and retaliatory behavior when gently confronted." Gently confronted. Elise's voice changed a little there. Even she heard how absurd that was next to the video she had now watched. Then came the sentence that mattered most. "I would strongly encourage you to delay or cancel her employment until a proper mental health clearance can be obtained." There it was. Concrete harm. Direct action. Not gossip. An attempt to block my job in writing. I asked Elise, "Can you tell me when it was sent?" She said, "Saturday night at 8:27 p.m. 8:27. 53 minutes after the accusation at the party." My mother had stepped away from the potato salad and candlelight and sat down somewhere in that house to type a child safety warning about me. I did not call her. I did not confront her. Instead, I wrote Elise an email, summarizing our call and asked her to confirm the wording I had copied down. She replied at 1:28 p.m., "Confirmed. That is accurate. Please also note I have not made a final employment decision. I saved that too. Friday afternoon, my father called. His voice was flat and patient, which usually meant he had rehearsed. Your mother tells me you're gathering documents. I am. That is very adversarial. You told a room full of people I was dangerous around children. No, he said. Your mother voiced a concern based on observed behavior. Name one behavior, he exhaled. Lindsey, this is why people worry. You become combative when redirected. I said, are you done? Then he changed tactics. Your mother's blood pressure has been high all week. If you keep pushing this, there will be consequences you cannot undo. That was his specialty, making my refusal to accept harm into a fresh harm against them. I said, there are already consequences I cannot undo, then I hung up. That night Nolan told me Becca did not want me around Wyatt until things were clearer. He looked embarrassed saying it. He should have, but I still remember how carefully he chose his words, like he was setting glass down. I asked, did she say dangerous? He nodded. I said, okay, that was the whole conversation. I sat in my car outside his duplex afterward for 11 minutes with the engine off and listened to a dog barking somewhere 2 streets over. Not the crying kind of pain, the sorting kind. The kind where your body starts moving pieces of your life into before and after without asking you first. Now let me take you back to Tuesday, May 21st at 4:10 in the afternoon, because that was when the first person inside my family finally stopped pretending she had seen nothing. It was Mariah. She asked if she could come by. She arrived in her silver Honda Pilot with Jonah asleep in the back seat and a tote bag on the passenger floor. She looked like she had not slept much either. There was sunscreen on her collar and dried goldfish cracker dust in the cup holder. When she came in, she did not sit down right away. She stood by my kitchen counter and said, I should have said something that night. I waited. She looked at the refrigerator magnets for a second and then said, a week before your housewarming, your mom called me. She asked if I remembered you getting overwhelmed with Jonah at Thanksgiving. I said no, I remembered you helping him. Then she said maybe I was forgetting parts because I was stressed. I felt that in my chest like a dropped object, Mariah continued. At the party, when she said dangerous around children, I knew what she was doing. I just froze. Then she opened the tote bag and handed me printed screenshots of text messages between her and my mother from May 4th and May 5th. I still have those pages. Dana, you saw how Lindsey can attach herself to children when she is dysregulated. Mariah, I did not see that. Dana, I am asking as a mother. We may need honest accounts if this becomes serious. Mariah, I am not saying that because it is not true. Then another from the next day. Dana, please think carefully. A lot is at stake. Mariah looked sick as I read them. I said, why are you giving me these now? She answered in a voice so low I almost missed it. Because she called Joel's office today and told his receptionist, our family had concerns about your judgment around minors. My husband does commercial roofing. There was no reason for her to call there except to spread it further. I think she wants the whole town to say it before anyone can stop her. That was the moment the scale of it changed for me. It was not just about my job at Little Pines. My mother was trying to saturate the town with one phrase until it became my reputation. I asked Mariah if she would email me the screenshots directly so the metadata stayed intact. She did. At 4:26 p.m., I printed the email header too. Then, because I had finally accepted that normal rules no longer applied, I made a spreadsheet: date, time, person contacted, method, exact statement if known, consequence. By the end of that night, the spreadsheet had 12 entries: housewarming accusation, text messages to me, email to daycare owner, call to Mariah before party, text to Mariah after, call to Joel's office, verbal repeat to Aunt Cheryl, verbal repeat to Becca at church parking lot according to Nolan, a message to the church children's director, not yet confirmed. A statement to neighbor Lisa Hargrove, who then canceled coffee with me. 3 unknown numbers from Sunday night I suspected came from church people. I know spreadsheets do not sound emotional, but if you have ever needed structure because your own family was trying to make reality slippery, you understand. Order can be a life raft. Wednesday, May 22nd, brought the church peace. I grew up at New Hope Community Church on Riverbend Road. I do not go every week now, but my parents do, and my mother treated the children's wing there like a stage she had earned. She was not staff, but she ran meal trains, organized nursery sign-ups, and acted like every hallway belonged to her. At 10:04 that morning, the children's ministry director, Tessa Barlow, called me from the church office. I knew the number because I had volunteered in the toddler room there in college. Her voice was formal. Lindsay, I wanted to let you know we have temporarily removed you from the substitute nursery list while we review a concern raised by your mother. I sat down on the edge of my bed. What concern? I asked. A pause. Paper shuffling. That you may present an emotional safety risk around young children. Emotional safety risk. That phrase did not come from my mother naturally. That phrase came from somebody trying to sound official in a room full of folding chairs, I said. Do you have that in writing? Another pause. Then cautiously, yes. Will you send me the exact wording used to remove me from the list? I should probably check with Pastor Neil first. Please do. At 11:41, she emailed, subject line, temporary pause on volunteer eligibility. Inside was one sentence that mattered. This action follows a verbal concern raised by Dana Mercer on Sunday, May 12th, and a follow-up email received Monday, May 13th. Follow-up email, my mother had done it again. I called Tessa back and asked if she would preserve the emails. She sounded surprised by the question. Of course, she said. Good, I thought. Preserve them. That afternoon, I drove to Spokane to meet Marisol in person because I needed somebody outside my family and my hometown to tell me I was not overreacting. We met at a Panera off Division Street. The place smelled like soup and warm bread and wet pavement from a sudden spring rain. I brought the blue file, the spreadsheet, and my laptop. Marisol read silently for 20 minutes. Then she asked, What does your mother gain if she succeeds? The question sat there. I said, control, proximity. If I cannot work with kids, I stay dependent. I take whatever job she approves of. I live nearby, I keep explaining myself. Marisol nodded. Then stop treating this like a misunderstanding, she said. It is a campaign. That line changed how I moved after that. A campaign needs records, timelines, witnesses. It also needs an ending point. I did not know the ending yet, but I started building toward one. The same night, I emailed Elise, Tessa, and my own training program with the same brief statement. I deny the allegation that I am unsafe around children. Please preserve any emails, voicemails, or notes received from Dana Mercer or Russell Mercer concerning me. I am collecting records related to false statements made on May 11th at a private gathering. I did not make threats. I did not use legal language. I just made sure people understood there was now a timeline and that I expected documents to stay where they were. Thursday, May 23rd at 7:19 p.m., my father left the voicemail that almost broke the whole thing open. I was in the cereal aisle at Safeway when it came in. I did not answer because I had learned enough by then. He left a message 46 seconds long. Lindsay, call me back. Your mother is under strain. This has gone far enough. People are making assumptions. We did not say you harmed a child. We said there had been instability, which is true in the broad sense. If this was taken more literally than intended, that is unfortunate, and I'm sorry for that wording, but you need to stop contacting institutions tied to this family. I stood there between Cheerios and Raisin Bran and replayed it twice. If this was taken more literally than intended. Sorry for that wording. Institutions tied to this family. That was not a full confession. It was better. It was an attempt to narrow the accusation after the damage had already spread. It was a man trying to pull smoke back into a match. I sent the audio file to my laptop, transcribed it, and put both versions in the folder. Then I forwarded it to Marisol with one line. He knows, she replied. 60 seconds later, yes, keep going. If you have ever had somebody try to ruin your life and then retreat into semantics once receipts start appearing, you know how insulting this part is. They stop saying the thing plainly. They start editing themselves backward. But records do not edit backward. Keep listening, because this was where people outside my family started comparing notes without my mother in the room, and that is when liars get sloppy. The next witness was someone I barely knew. Her name was Lisa Hargrove, one of the Alder Lane neighbors. She had been at the housewarming in a denim jacket and had canceled coffee with me 2 days later with the text, "Sorry, family week is crazy." On Friday morning, she sent me a message asking if we could talk privately. We met in the parking lot behind the public library because this town loves privacy but has nowhere private. There was cut grass in the air and the hum of the library air conditioner against the brick wall. Lisa said, "I need to tell you something and I should have done it sooner." She told me that after the party, while people were leaving, she had gone back inside to grab her Tupperware container from the kitchen. From the hallway, she heard my mother on the phone saying, "I have already warned the daycare owner. The church will do the rest." I asked if she was sure of the wording. She repeated it exactly the same way twice. Then she said the part that mattered even more. "Your father told her to slow down because Andrea Colton was still in the driveway. Your mother said, 'Good. Let her hear enough to repeat it.'" I wrote all of that down after Lisa left and emailed her a summary so she could confirm it in writing. She replied, "Accurate." By Saturday, May 25th, I had enough to understand the shape of what they were doing, but not enough to stop it publicly. I needed someone with standing, someone outside the family, someone my parents could not dismiss as me being dramatic or unstable. That person turned out to be Elise Navarro. She called me at 8:15 Monday morning, Memorial Day, while I was wiping down my bathroom mirror. "Can you meet me tomorrow?" she asked. "I think we should sit down in person." We met Tuesday, May 28th at 10 a.m. in her office at Little Pines. The room smelled like copier paper, hand sanitizer, and those cinnamon oatmeal bars they give kids at snack time. She had my file in front of her, and my mother's emails printed in a stack with sticky notes attached. There were two emails. Not one, two. The first was the one she had read me over the phone. The second came Sunday night at 9:54 p.m., and it was worse. Elise handed me a copy. It said, "I also need to disclose that Lindsey has a pattern of becoming possessive around small children and has had to be redirected by family members more than once. We are trying to avoid a tragedy before it becomes one." A tragedy? I looked up at Elise and said, "That never happened." "I know," she said. "It was the first time anyone in authority had said that to me out loud." She explained that she had delayed my start because she had an obligation to take any safety allegations seriously, especially from a parent and longtime church volunteer in town. But after watching the housewarming video, reading my training evaluations, comparing the language in my mother's emails with the exact words spoken at the party, and speaking to Marisol by phone, she no longer believed my mother was reporting a concern in good faith. Then she said, "There is a board meeting for the church child care wing on Thursday night. Tessa asked me to attend because your mother has been pushing them to make your removal permanent. I think you should come too." I said, "Am I allowed to?" Elise answered, "It concerns your eligibility and reputation." "Yes." Then she added, "Bring everything." That was my invitation into the right room. I spent Wednesday night at my kitchen table making 3 clean copies of the packet. One for me, one for Elise, one for whoever in that room was willing to understand chronology. I included a contents page, 1 video transcript from May 11th, 2 screenshots of parental texts, 3 voicemail transcript from Russell Mercer, 4 counseling attendance summary, 5 training evaluations, 6 Mariah's texts with Dana, 7 Lisa Hargrove witness summary, 8 email confirmation from Tessa regarding church removal, 9 timeline spreadsheet. I was not trying to bury people in paper. I was trying to make lying more work than telling the truth. That is an important difference. Now let me take you back to Thursday, May 30th, at 6:52 p.m. in the fellowship room at New Hope Community Church. The room had those stackable navy chairs and a long table with a coffee urn at one end. The carpet smelled faintly like old vacuum dust and powdered creamer. There were 9 people there when I arrived. Pastor Neil Sutter, Tessa Barlow, Elise Navarro, 2 childcare board volunteers, my mother, my father, Aunt Cheryl, because apparently my mother needed moral support and me. The meeting was supposed to start at 7. My mother was already seated, a yellow legal pad in front of her like she was there for governance, not character assassination. She wore a cream cardigan and pearl earrings. She looked composed. My father stood near the coffee urn with his hands in his pockets, talking quietly to Pastor Neil. When I walked in with the blue file, my mother's eyes dropped to it immediately. She said, "You came prepared." I set the file down and answered, "Yes," that was all. At 7 o'clock exactly, Pastor Neil opened with a prayer so strained and generic it barely qualified as language. Then he said, "We are here to discuss concerns that have been raised about Lindsey's appropriateness for children's volunteer roles and any related issues affecting the church community." Appropriateness. That was how they laundered cruelty here. My mother spoke first. Of course she did. Calm voice, folded hands, slightly lowered chin, the posture of someone performing burdened love. "I want to be clear," she said. "This has never been about punishment. It is about caution. As Lindsay's mother, I have observed patterns over time that make me concerned for young children in emotionally charged settings. Elise said, "Can you name one specific incident with date and place?" My mother did not look at her. Family matters are not always neat. Responsible adults do not wait for a catastrophe before they act. Tessa asked, "But was there an incident?" My father cut in. "We are not comfortable detailing private family experiences in a committee setting." I almost laughed at the wording. Private family experiences. They had said it in a house full of neighbors and sent it by email to my employer and church staff. Elise opened her folder. "With respect, you made it a committee setting. When you contacted a childcare employer and this church in writing, silence." I could hear the coffee urn making those little metal tick sounds as it cooled. My mother turned to me then, not angry, worse, sorrowful. "Lindsay, if you had simply taken time to stabilize after Spokane, none of this would have been necessary." I said, "What happened in Spokane?" She looked at me like I had disappointed her by needing the lie spelled out. "Your moods became erratic," she said. "You became overly involved with other people's children. You interpreted ordinary boundaries as rejection. There are moments where you feel your pulse in your teeth." That was one. I did not argue. I slid one copy of my packet toward Pastor Neil and one toward Tessa. Then I said, "Page 1 is a transcript from the party. Page 3 is my father's voicemail from May 23rd. Page 6 is text messages my mother sent Mariah before the party asking her to confirm a story Mariah said was false." My mother inhaled once. Small, sharp. Pastor Neil started turning pages. My father said, "We have not authenticated any of this." And right then there was a knock at the fellowship room door. Tessa turned and said, "Come in." A woman I had never met stepped inside wearing navy slacks and carrying a manila folder and a stainless travel mug. She had short, dark hair and reading glasses on a chain. Tessa stood up and introduced her. "This is Gwen Holloway," she said. "She is on the Church Risk Management Council for the district office. I asked her to sit in because the concerns involved child safety statements and written communication." That was the outsider. Gwen did not know my family. That was why her presence mattered. She took the empty chair at the far end of the table, set down her folder, and said, "I only need to see the documents that were cited in the email trail." The room changed shape at that point. You could feel it. My mother's authority had always depended on context. Once an unfamiliar professional entered with no investment in family mythology, the air shifted. Tessa handed Gwen the printed emails my mother had sent. Gwen read them silently. Then she asked, "Do you have the response materials?" Elise handed over my packet. Gwen read for a full 2 minutes. No one spoke. The wall clock over the nursery check-in cabinet clicked louder than it had any right to. Then Gwen said, "I want to read one sentence into the record from the second email sent by Dana Mercer on Sunday, May 12th at 9:54 p.m. My mother moved in her chair. "Not much, enough." Gwen read, "We are trying to avoid a tragedy before it becomes one." No one breathed for half a second. Then Gwen set the paper down and asked in the plainest voice I have ever heard, "What specific documented event was this sentence based on?" My mother said nothing. My father tried. Concern does not always come with documentation. Gwen turned one page in my packet and said, "That would matter more if the sender had not represented a pattern of unsafe conduct as established fact to a childcare employer and church staff." Then she picked up the transcript of my father's voicemail and asked, "Is this accurate?" Elise answered before anyone else could. "I listened to the audio myself in Lindsay's presence this afternoon. Yes." Gwen read one line aloud. "If this was taken more literally than intended, that is unfortunate and I am sorry for that wording." Then she looked directly at my parents for the first time and said, "That sounds less like a safety report and more like a retraction attempt." My father's jaw tightened. My mother went very still. Aunt Cheryl dropped her eyes to the table. That is the thing about truth when it finally enters a room properly. It does not need a speech, it just needs someone with no emotional debt to the liar. If you have ever waited for a person in authority to simply read the words back and stop pretending everyone is confused, you know how holy that moment feels. I had been carrying that folder for 19 days. What happened next was quiet, but it was the kind of quiet that rearranges loyalties. Gwen asked for the housewarming video. I handed over my phone. She watched it once with the volume up. Everyone in that room heard my mother's voice say, She is unstable and dangerous around children. They also heard me ask, when was I unstable around a child? And my mother's answer, I am not going to list private incidents at your own gathering. When the video ended, Gwen placed the phone face down on the table and said, "There is no incident named here. There is no document attached to the emails. There is, however, evidence of repeated outreach to institutions concerning a young woman's access to children and employment. That is not a pastoral concern at this point. That is reputational harm." My mother finally spoke, just one sentence. "I was trying to protect people." Gwen answered, "From what?" My mother opened her mouth, closed it, looked at my father. He said nothing. Pastor Neil cleared his throat and folded his hands. "Based on what I have heard," he said, "we will not be taking any action against Lindsey's volunteer eligibility. Effective immediately, the temporary pause is lifted." Tessa nodded. Elise looked down at her notes, almost like she was giving my parents the dignity of not watching them absorb it. But it did not stop there. Gwen asked Elise, "Has employment at your center been affected by these communications?" Elise said, "Yes. I delayed Lindsay's start date and paused onboarding while reviewing the allegations." Gwen asked, "Will that be corrected?" Elise answered, "Yes. I have already prepared a written reinstatement if this meeting confirmed what I suspected." She opened her folder and slid a letter across the table to me. Little Pines Learning Center formally withdraws all prior employment holds related to unsupported child safety allegations received on May 11th and 12th. Your employment start date is reset to Monday, June 3rd at $19 per hour, and your missed orientation time will be paid. Paid. I looked at the number at the bottom. They had added $722.40 for the hours I lost during the delay. Concrete, specific, real. Then Gwen asked one last question. Who else received these allegations in writing from Dana Mercer? Tessa answered first. "I did," Elise said. "I did." Then, after a long pause, Pastor Neil said, "Dana also approached me in the parking lot after Sunday service and repeated the concern verbally. Gwen wrote that down." She then said, "District policy requires a temporary communication restriction when an adult uses child safety language without factual support to influence staffing or volunteer decisions. Dana Mercer, effective tonight, you are suspended from all nursery, childcare, and family ministry volunteer activities pending district review. You are also not to contact staff or outside childcare providers about Lindsey Mercer again." My mother blinked once. That was it. Not a scream. Not tears. One blink. One small break in control. My father said, "This is disproportionate." Gwen looked at him and answered, "No, it is contained." Contained. I still think about that word. My mother tried once more. "Surely there can be some private path through this." Gwen said, "You used public accusations and written warnings. This is the private path." Silence. Aunt Cheryl, who had said almost nothing all night, finally spoke in a voice so thin it barely crossed the table. "Dana, you told me there was an incident." My mother did not answer her. That was the moment Cheryl's face changed, not dramatically, just enough to show that she understood she had been used. The meeting ended at 7:48 p.m. as chairs scraped and people stood. My mother stayed seated for a second too long, staring at the yellow legal pad she had not written on once. My father reached for her elbow. She pulled away without looking at him. On my way out, Elise touched my arm lightly and said, "Be at Little Pines Monday at 7:30. We will start clean." I said, "Thank you." Then Gwen, the woman I had never met before that night, paused beside me in the hall and said, "Keep every record for at least a year." I said, "I will." She nodded once and walked out into the parking lot. Just like that, the truth had arrived, done its work, and left. The concrete price got bigger over the next 3 weeks. On Monday, June 3rd, I started at Little Pines. The toddler room smelled like washable paint, goldfish crackers, and baby sunscreen. My name was printed on a laminated badge. My orientation pay hit my account on Friday, June 7th. $722.40. I stared at the deposit like it was a medical result. Elise also sent a correction email to all staff who had been informed of the hold. It stated that prior safety concerns relayed about Lindsey Mercer were unsupported and should not be repeated. She copied me. I printed that too. At New Hope, district review took 12 days. On Tuesday, June 11th, Tessa forwarded me the final notice because my name was referenced in the restriction. Dana Mercer was removed from all children's ministry volunteer roles for 1 year and barred from contacting staff regarding childcare eligibility decisions involving Lindsey. If she violated that, the restriction could become permanent. My mother had spent 9 years curating her church identity through that nursery hallway. 1 year out of it in a town that small was not symbolic. It was social amputation. There was another price, too. Elise told me quietly on Wednesday, June 12th, that because my mother had contacted Little Pines with knowingly unsupported claims, and because the delay had cost payroll adjustments and administrative time, the center's insurance attorney sent her a demand for reimbursement of $1,386 in review and staffing costs if she continued making contact or repeated the allegation to enrolled families. My mother stopped immediately. No one had to take her to court for the lesson to reach her mailbox. As for my father, the hardware store board removed him from the summer youth build program after Pastor Neil mentioned the church review to one of the board members. He did not lose his job. I'm not going to pretend that happened, but he lost the part of his public life he actually cared about. The respectable mentoring piece, the photo op piece, the one where people called him patient and steady around teenagers with power tools. He called me on Father's Day. I let it go to voicemail. His message was 13 seconds long. Your mother is not doing well with this. If you wanted accountability, you have it. I deleted the message after saving the audio file to my laptop. That is the shape of some apologies, not remorse. Complaint. Nolan came back faster than his sister did. He apologized properly on June 14th, sitting at my kitchen table with a grocery store bouquet he knew I did not want but brought anyway because he needed something in his hands. He said, "I believed you, but I hesitated, and that matters. I'm sorry," I said, "it does matter." We stayed together, but not because I was trying to prove I was forgiving. We stayed together because he learned the difference between asking careful questions and leaving me alone in the blast radius. Becca took longer. In September, she finally asked if I wanted to take Wyatt for ice cream. I said yes. I also noticed she did not leave us alone for the first 15 minutes. Damage has a half-life. Mariah and I got closer after that summer. She still says she is ashamed she froze at the party. I told her the truth, which is that freezing is common and still costly. Both can be true. She gave me the screenshots that mattered. Without them, my mother would have called her concern spontaneous. Maternal, off the cuff. The texts proved planning. Aunt Cheryl sent me a birthday card in October with $40 in it and a note that said, "I'm sorry I did not ask harder questions." I kept the note. I donated the $40 to Little Pines for sensory toys. As for my mother, she never apologized in a way that deserved the word. In August, she mailed me a 2-page letter, not handwritten, typed. She said she regretted how the matter was communicated, and that community members overreacted to nuanced family concerns. That was the whole strategy again. No lie named, no harm owned, just language sanding itself down. I put the letter in the blue file and did not answer. People ask if I speak to my parents now. A little, rarely controlled holidays in public settings, if I feel like it. No private confidences, no unsupervised access to anything soft in my life. They do not get my address anymore. They do not get details about my work. If my mother asks about the children at Little Pines, I say, "Work is good." And then I ask someone else about potato salad. I won, and I need to be honest about what that means. Winning did not restore the first look on Nolan's face in the driveway. It did not erase the way Becca picked Wyatt up from the floor as if my shadow itself had changed temperature. It did not return those 19 days where I woke up and checked my phone before I even sat up because I was afraid of what institution she had called next. That damage stays in the body, but the record stays too. There is something deeply calming about a lie meeting a timestamp, about a practiced family story colliding with an outsider who has no reason to protect it. My mother stood in her own house and tried to turn me into a danger sign. For 19 days, she almost got away with it. Then a daycare owner, a church director, a district risk manager, a cousin who stopped freezing, and a father careless enough to apologize sideways built the bridge back to the truth. I still have the blue file. It is in the bottom drawer of my desk under spare batteries and old training manuals. Sometimes when I open that drawer for something ordinary, I see the tab labeled May 11th. The plastic is worn at the edge where my thumb kept finding it. I do not take it out often anymore. I do not need to. My mother cannot volunteer with children at New Hope until next June. My father is still off the youth build team. Little Pines has now given me a raise to $21 an hour. And last month, Elise asked if I wanted to train the new aides on de-escalation basics for preschoolers. I said yes. Some endings are loud. Mine was paperwork in a fellowship room and one woman reading a sentence aloud. That was enough.